back, guys and girls, for today's show. Today we have a very special guest on episode 83. Her name is Danielle Wilcox. So a little bit more of her personal background, what she's working on, some incredible things and stuff that she accomplished. So just want to let you know, she's the resident astronomer and telescope operator at Blackrock Castle Observatory in Cork. So anybody, that's actually in Ireland, so I have to mention that. So anybody who lives in there or close to that, maybe they can visit the place and, I don't know, do the COVID regulations, because she kind of says that. So I think that says yes. So great place to visit. She's also a coordinator for Space Week Ireland and runs space events across the country. She does a lot of astronomy outreach events with the public and is involved in bringing space directly into the classroom. Really cool. Her passion is telescopes, where her favorite part of the job is getting to run a 16-inch Meade LX200R research telescope at the observatory. She works alongside their co-founder and resident astrophysicist to gather images. The main research is on exoplanets and supermassive black holes. So well, of course, we have to touch these subjects. So lastly, she is the owner of Meade LXD75 N6 that is called Eleanor, and she's her pride and joy. And of course, you're going to find a couple links included in the show notes for Instagram, Twitter, and maybe something else. You should go and get in contact with Danielle, and again, ask her more questions about astrophotography, astronomy, and anything else related to space science. So Danielle, appreciate you joining me today. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Again, super happy that we connected. Shout out to Helena again for making this happen. She's really cool, awesome. Not far from from us, from Scotland. So she's doing great things. And again, I'm a big fan of what you're doing as well. I love everything. I mean, like astronomy or space science, and especially now as we kind of talk behind the scenes, there's a lot of people joining, the ranks of astrophotographers. So for you to kind of be part of the community and go on and continue to inspire other people, sometimes I don't think, people like you understand how big of a role they play in the community. So again, thank you again for joining us today, and thank you again for sharing all the information, so I appreciate it.
Thanks, that's very nice of you to say.
So look, Danielle, so can we go back to the beginning stages, and maybe can you explain to the people of how does someone decide to start their personal journey in astrophotography or, in astronomy, and how does one ended up working in an observatory at the same time too?
Yeah, okay, those are two big questions, but yeah. Okay. So the astrophotography side, actually, I did it a little bit backwards, because a lot of people will start with the camera, point it to the sky, and start shooting away and see what they get and progress from there. I did the opposite, where I started working at the observatory, fell in love with the idea of being able to image the night sky, and kind of went into the deep end, and then came out and started seeing, well, what can I get away with just like my phone or just a regular camera? So my kind of story is all over the place, but I fell in love with, I'd have to say I fell in love with astronomy in general when I was very young, because even though I grew up in Buffalo, New York, where there is a lot of light pollution, I was very fortunate that my family had a cabin an hour drive away from Buffalo, down into more into like the foothills of the mountains and stuff. And so from there, I was very lucky that I had beautiful night skies. As a kid growing up, I just, took it for granted, that to me was just, that's what the sky looks like. And I didn't know that when the other people are in cities, they grow up their whole life, they never even see stars. So I was very lucky I got to even see the Milky Way. And I have to credit my grandmother, because she actually used to have a sky chart that she had cut out from a newspaper, and she had it on the back of one of the cupboards inside of the cabin, and she used to like send us out to go look and see if you could find this constellation, kind of a thing. So I could pick out constellations at a young age, just a few. I didn't know a ton, but I knew a few of the names, and I loved being able to do that. But I didn't go to school for astronomy. I decided I had a separate passion, and I went to school for that first. I didn't know astronomy was something that I could work in. I just thought that was something fun to do. You go out in the night sky, look at the stars. I had no idea that you could work in space. This is something that's actually, there's a lot of opportunity, and I didn't know that was a thing.
That's very interesting. So how did you discover that was actually a thing? And what would you say for the people, who are trying to pursue their own personal careers in the space industry? again, whatever that might be. So what would you say to those people?
Yeah.
Like, where do you find that, if they feel like they have a passion for that, like, where do you find a place? Where do you start?
Yeah, there's so much opportunity actually. And it's the more I get into to meeting more people working in the space industry, I realize just how diverse it is. And because you hear people say, oh, there's so much that you can do in space, but there really, really is. And so I'm a prime example of that. My background's in foreign languages. I went to school. My first passion was really learning Spanish. I wanted to be fluent in it. So I just dedicated myself to that, lived in Spain. And so I studied all of these different languages, and that allowed me to travel around. So I bounced all over the place, and I ended up getting a job because I spoke Spanish. I got a job in Florida. So I left Spain, came back to the United States, worked in Florida, worked in the aviation industry, which coincidentally had a lot to do with aerospace. And I was working with people from like Boeing and Lockheed Martin and all these. It's just funny that I ended up in space anyways. But yeah, so I was working in aviation. And just because of where I was, I happened to be in St. Petersburg, Florida. And they had a local, it was from the college. St. Petersburg College had their own local television station. And colleges have guest speakers in all the time, and they would put it out on the college television station. And so one night I was flipping through the channels on TV, and I came across this speaker, and I was like, who is this guy? And I never watched this channel. Like, who watches the local like student channel, So I'm watching him give this presentation. He's all over the place, and he's moving while he's talking, and I just couldn't stop watching him. And he started talking about the universe. He started talking about how the elements that are out there are the same elements that are inside of us. And that sparked something in me. And I never thought, nobody had ever said to me before that, you have this idea you're in the universe, but never that I was a part of it, like physically a part of it. That changed the way I looked at everything. So turns out it was Neil deGrasse Tyson. And this was way back. This was like 2012 or something like that. So this was before he really was big and famous like he is now. And so I just found anything I could find on YouTube from him. I started reading all of his books, fell in love with the idea of astrophysics and astronomy and being able to work in it. I'd never looked through a telescope before. I had what I thought was my dream job. I was working in a job that allowed me to speak Spanish, that allowed me to travel. That's what I always wanted. And then suddenly I was just like, I feel different about this. Like, astronomy's got me like so excited. I was on my lunch break reading astronomy books at my job. So I decided that I wanted to see if it was something I could actually work in, and if I could find a career path, or was this just a hobby? Was this something that I would do outside of my work? So in the meantime, I moved again, and I got a job, and I started working in Poland, living and working there. And I was still really obsessed with astronomy while I was there. And I started to look up events. I wanted to see if there were astronomy events happening. And I found a festival called Starmus, which is incredible. And I've gone to 2 of them, and they happen every couple of years. It's a week-long astronomy event. And it's expensive, but I saved up for like a full year to buy the ticket, and especially because living in Poland, your money's not worth as much. So I really had to save for it. And it was in Tenerife in Spain, but in the Canary Islands. And Neil deGrasse Tyson was there. So I went, and I actually got to meet him. I got to talk to him. And Stephen Hawking was there. It was just the most incredible event. Like, anybody you could think of that was involved in astronomy was there. And while I was there, I realized this is not just a hobby. This is not just something that I want to do on the weekends. I want to do this as a career. And I was terrified. I was in my, like, at that point, late 20s. I'm like, nobody does this. Nobody goes to school, gets a degree, and then changes career paths. And then to go from an arts degree into like a science field, like, what am I thinking? I'm going crazy. So I held on to this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I ended up moving again, came to Ireland, and I coincidentally ended up in Cork, of all places. And Cork was hosting the International Space University, the International Space Studies program, that summer. So when I moved to Cork, I was like, this is the best city in the world. Like, I had never heard of the ISU before. And I just thought that Cork was just all about space and was obsessed with it. And I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. So I was going to like astronaut talks and all this stuff. And I happened to move down the street from an observatory. So what city just has the observatory just sitting? I mean, there are a lot of cities with observatories, but yeah, I just happened to be in walking distance from it. So I found the observatory, and the day I was walking and I found it, I should mention it's at the top of a castle too, so it's not the most normal observatory. It's at the top of a tower in a castle. I walked past the castle, saw the observatory, and I said to myself out loud, actually, I don't care if I just clean the toilets in that place. I'm going to work there. I'm going to figure it out. And a few months later, I wasn't finding jobs anywhere else. So I ended up just, I don't know what, and I think it was just pure passion. I don't know how else to explain it. I just got up and was like, I'm walking in there and I'm going to ask for a job. And it was a Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock. And I walked in the door. I was like, can I work here? And they were like, yeah, like, well, what are you good at? What do you do? Just like anything, give me a job. So it was coincidence, because a lot of what I've done is either just pure me being a bit crazy, and also like just good luck, I guess, too. I happened to walk in a month before their Space Week planning had started. So they said, do you have admin experience? Do you have experience running events? Do you have yeah, I have tons of all that. So they said, you come on in and start working on Space Week. So my first job ever working at the observatory was organizing Space Week and Space Week events. And my real first task was planning the trip for the former deputy administrator of NASA and her husband, who is an architect for extreme environments, and he did the labs like in Antarctica, and the labs he did some modules in the International Space Station. And I was like, this job's amazing, like I'm obsessed with this. So yeah, I got in the door doing the admin stuff, and because of my background working in the Aviation Academy, I had a lot of experience with organizing things and paperwork and all that fun stuff. And so I was able to apply that and get in the door. And also one small part too, I actually had started a YouTube channel, a travel YouTube channel, while I was moving around. And through that, I got to know social media and all the different platforms and that kind of thing. And when I came in, I said, you could use a little help with like video work and things like that. So they had me start doing that for them as well. And so I was able to apply those skills. And that's a part of what my job is now, is doing a lot of video work. So I still get to do the creative, artsy, fun stuff. But now I'm making content for space, which I love. So all of this allowed me to get in the door. But there's a lab on site with an astrophysicist in it. And there was a research side to this whole business. And anytime that lab door was open, even just a little bit, I would go into my lunch breaks and I would sit outside, because that's where the table was for lunch. And I'd just wait for the door to be open. And I'd be like, hi. And I was like, is Alan here? And I would just bug him about the telescopes and space. And I would get him talking about stuff. And I had never used a telescope before. I was dying to use one. I always wanted one. And because I kind of just wore him down to the point where he's like, I'm just going to leave the door open. She's going to come in anyways. She's going to ask me anyway. Anyways. So, and he ended up giving me a telescope to take home. And it was a small ETX70, Meade ETX70. And he said, do you want to try it out at home and see what you get? And I took my first picture through that, and that was it. I was hooked. I was like, I'm gonna do what I keep doing with the admin and the video work and stuff, but whatever time there is possible that you can give to me for working on the telescopes, please. And yeah, he has been teaching me everything for the last about 1.5 to 2 years, everything I know now comes from all the stuff that he's been teaching me. So I'm very, very lucky that I have somebody who's so dedicated to teaching me all of this amazing stuff.
That is amazing. That's probably one of the best stories that I heard so far. Like, even though, like, I think that's a great example for, a lot of people who are really young, because, this younger generation, especially in the States, they love to move around, a lot. And including myself, like, I lived personally myself in different countries before. So for you going to Buffalo, New York, Spain, back to Florida, Poland, and then ended up in Cork, Ireland, it's been quite a journey, but I mean, the stars is just aligned for you perfectly. And I think it's part of that, you have this enormous passion, which a lot of people can see in your face. I mean, it just, you just,
Yeah.
you cannot hide it. So it's really exciting to see you personally, to find that passion, which again, astronomy is for you. And, so can you talk about a little bit more? Again, I love the personal story that you gave. I mean, it's really incredible. So for the younger people who are watching and thinking is like, should I do the same? Should I travel a bunch of countries and then find like what I want to achieve and and what I want to do? Or like is there a quick kind of way for people to understand how they can get involved with the, astronomy or science community?
Yeah, so yeah, my story is a little crazy. You don't have to take my path because I went all over the place, but there's so many opportunities. So when I talk to especially students that are interested in it, I ask them, what are you interested in? What is it that you're interested in? And whatever it is, there's usually something in space related to that. So like I have students that say, well, I'm not really into space or science, but I like sports. And I said, you wouldn't believe it, but they actually look at athletes and they look at how like their muscles develop and what kind of exercises they need to do, because that's stuff that can be applied to astronauts on the International Space Station, or even when they start going to the moon. So there is a whole sports science and how the body adapts to being in different types of gravity and things. So if you're interested in sports, it could be related to space. And same thing with like arts and things. There's so many incredible space artists that I've met who are just so passionate about painting, and even just if you're interested in color and how to manipulate image, not even I hate using the word manipulate because then people go, oh, they Photoshop things, but like you do have to apply. We take research images are done in black and white, and then the colors applied later. So there are people out there who are artists and they have to figure out, is this the right color for this? Is this what this is supposed to look like? So there's space for artists and space lawyers. That's my favorite. I'm obsessed with the idea of space lawyers. I met a space lawyer for an event we did for Space Week. I've met her a few times, and she's up in Dublin. And I'm so obsessed with her job. Like it's such a cool job because I learned from her that the modules on the International Space Station are actually different. They're governed by different countries. So depending on where they are, they have like Japanese law is one part and the US law is another and the Russian law is another. So if you're going through different places, like that all has to be governed by different
So
people.
do they have like a customs before you go to a different module?
Know, right? But like even we're planning to go back to the moon. We're gonna go. It's 2024, I think, is the goal right now. And that what the problem with space travel is that we're humans and we're taking our humanness with us. So the space law is actually going to be a real thing. Unfortunately, somebody will end up getting murdered in space, or somebody will end up stealing something in space. And like there's so much there that this idea of space law is a very new thing. But yeah, if you're interested in law, like think about doing space law. So literally anything you're interested in, go for it. And if you think that if you like space but you're also into something else, there's a possibility you can blend those two together. And that's what I'm doing. I'm doing video work for space and working on telescopes.
Here you go. That's really awesome. So that's a really great advice because, as I said, there are so many different entry points into this industry. Again, a lot of those entry points probably are fairly new, as you mentioned, in the space law, because they're still trying to like it's a startup phase right now. Like if we even can call it. I mean, people are just doing a bunch of research and and basically they're just finding answers, and trying to guess most of the time if this is going to be right or wrong. So we can be part of a lot of great projects because I know I had a few people on the show who work for startup companies in UK or in different parts of the world for the space companies, whatever that may be, satellites or rockets or different stuff. So I think somebody who has that passion or they think they have, or you can work for somebody who is as one of the people in NASA said, who now works and he builds the clean rooms for NASA currently. He said he started to work as a contractor with NASA. So he was a contractor. He used to supply the parts and the equipment, and then he ended up working in NASA in different position. He was an engineer. He was working in different position, different, and now he builds all these clean rooms. So I mean, it's a journey for everybody.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It really is. And there are so many different opportunities. And like you said, you never know exactly what what avenue could lead you to space. And I met a lot of people myself that started off in one direction and somehow ended up in space and they love it. And I interview a lot of people that work in space for my job. And I've yet to find anybody who says, yeah, my job's okay. Like, they all just love it. You know, everybody seems to really love being in the space industry. So it's definitely something worth going after.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely not one of those cubicle jobs, you know, that's kind of boring. You just come in and you can't wait for the Friday to, you know, to be there. So it's super
That's an
exciting.
important point. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another part of it. That's another thing I hear all the time is I never hear anybody go, my job's so boring. It's like, I go, describe a typical day. And they go, I don't have a typical day. I never know exactly what I'm getting into, which I get because my day's like that as well. Like I could go in today, I was doing a lot of video editing, but like Friday, we were working on the telescope. We were doing calibration runs for Mirrorflop actually. Sounds pretty boring to most people, but for me, I was loving it. So much fun.
Exactly. So for those people who love the variety, you know, in the job and they don't, you know, if you don't love do the same thing all over again, I'm sure there was sometimes those tasks are you're going to be there regardless because you just have to, you know, if that's going to be a brand new industry or looking to pursue something, you will have to do some things, you know, all over again until you're going to get good at it, great at it. So, you know, consistency has to be there, you know, but it's not going to be that boring, you know. I'm
Oh, it's
pretty,
definitely not
yeah.
boring.
For sure. So part of the journey, as I mentioned, you know, just getting inspired, as you said, you know, is like you discovered this event that you saved all the money for in Poland, and then you went back to Spain for that event, and now you run the Space Week Ireland event. So can you talk about that a little bit more? Is this going to be available soon for people to be part of it, and how people can be part of it in the future?
Yeah, so Space Week Ireland is definitely my baby. Like because I started out with that, so I'm really passionate about Space Week Ireland. It's part of the global initiative. So there's World Space Week that happens every year. It's the 4th to the 10th of October. So in Ireland as well, we run it the 4th to the 10th, and we have been. I'm going to brag a little bit, but we have been at the top of the World Space Week list over and over again. There are a lot of countries that participate. And I think the first year was in it, Ireland ranked number 2. And we were only beat out by Saudi Arabia, which has a much larger population. And they've also mandated schools to run events for Space Week. So, and which I think is fantastic. I think it's great that they are at the top. And I think this year, I think it was, I want to say it was Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. It was another country as well. It's much larger pop. I'm putting this part in there because we are a small little country, so I'm still excited that we're at the top there. I haven't seen the full report this year. I think we're number 3, I want to say. I'm not sure about that. But yeah, I'm very excited that this small little island ends up being at the top of the Space Week ladder, because I think, and when you think about space, a lot of people would think the US and they think Russia, or they think other countries, and I don't think people put Ireland on the map for space, but we are. Like, there's a huge appetite for space here, and we see it every year for Space Week. I mean, we've run so many events across the country. We had over 80,000 participants last year across the country, and I run a couple of the programs where my favorite, I shouldn't say my favorite, but it is kind of my favorite. It's the Zero Space Goes to School program. So we have, I have a lot of speakers that are either in NASA, or the European Space Agency, or space lawyers, or astrophysicists, all different people from different backgrounds. And I pair them up with teachers, and they Skype into the classroom. Well, it was Skype, but now with all of everything going on, people are more interested in Zoom and all, you know, every platform. Yep. So they virtually go into the classroom, and they talk to the kids about their jobs and what they do in the space industry, and talk to them about it. And it's such a good program. I get so much good feedback from it, because it's an opportunity for kids to have one-on-one time with somebody actually in space. So it's not just a presentation where they come in and say, this is my job, and that's it, they leave. The kids get a Q&A session. So they get really excited about it. The teachers will let them know in advance who the speaker is going to be. I give the teachers all the information, like, this is who the person is, this is what they do, so that the kids can get thinking about it. And the feedback that I get from the kids and from the teachers and from the speakers is just phenomenal. And it's so good to see that the kids are so interested in it. And actually today I saw an email that right at the end of the day from the program, actually, that it made the local newspaper in Monaghan, and they had their like class projects. They did space projects, and it was based on the talk that was given by one of the space speakers during the program. So it's really cool to see that kind of thing, because it's actually having an impact. So we don't just do educational events during Space Week, though. We do a lot of public outreach, and we run all different types of things. Like we've had a space theater show that was about living on Mars, and we've had oh my gosh, we've had so many things. We had like scuba diving, and like so that people could see what it's like for astronaut training, and just our star parties. We have people that come up to the castle, and we'll do at the observatory. We'll put telescopes out in the courtyard, and we'll have observing nights and talks. And we do lots of different things. So many different things happening during Space Week. So around September is usually when we really start putting a lot of events out, so people can see what's coming up. Check out the Space Week website, spaceweek.ie, and you'll get to see all the events there. And then you can register your own too. Like if you want, you don't have to wait for us to do stuff. If you want to run your own event, you register it, and then we send you out some fun Space Week goodies. You get a pack of like space stuff. So anybody who registers events gets space stuff from us.
That is awesome. That is awesome. That's really cool. So I would like to ask you a question about, having all these events, and, you mentioned about the feedback that you're getting from all these kids. So can you talk about that? Like what type of feedback are you getting from kids? Like what is like the top few or three like questions that you're getting from most of the kids, and what type of trends do you see when it comes to questioning, and maybe do the kids talk about the Mars because now it's kind of one of the biggest topics, or they're talking about something else that whereas people are not aware about, at least now, that's not in the news.
No, it's good. It's interesting because I wouldn't say that there's a one topic that they talk about all the time. It's exactly what you're saying. Depending on what's happening, that's where all the questions come from. A lot of times they get influenced by what's going on. And I think there's so much interest right now in space that there's so much happening on social media. The kids are a lot more clued in than I feel like I was, or like my friends were growing up. And I feel like the kids really know what's happening. I think I have to credit a lot of that to SpaceX, because they're really just all over social media. Yeah. And when you're blowing stuff up, you get attention. So kids are like, what's happening with these rockets falling out of the sky? I think when there's not anything trending at the moment, a lot of my questions are about black holes. I get a lot of like, what happens if you fall into a black hole? But I get so many good questions. Like I had one recently, and I was just talking about this. A kid just asked me out of the blue, how long would it take to drive around the sun? And I thought, I can't answer that off the top of, like, there's an answer for that. I can't tell you right now. We can calculate it, but I don't have time to do that right now. But the fact that they think that way, or I had a kid actually one time ask me too, could I drive my car on the rings of Saturn? And I thought, like, that's not anything I ever would have thought of. And I was like, well, no, actually you can't really. I know it looks like you can, but you can't. And one of my favorites, I think the younger kids ask really good questions, because they're just, their brains aren't formed yet, like to be like, oh, we can't ask that because that's not a good question, or I know too much about that. They just ask things, and they ask the most brilliant things. So I had a kid in, we do planetarium shows at the observatory as well. So we're in a planetarium show, and I asked if there were any questions at the end. And we had talked about an eclipse that was happening in the show. So one of the kids asked, if I'm standing on the moon, and now I have to think about it too, because he said, if I'm standing on the moon during a lunar eclipse, is that then a solar eclipse for me? And I actually had to pause and think about it, because I was like, yeah.
Wow, that's
well, like, brilliant. Like, that's such a good question. So working with the students is a lot of fun, because you just never know what they're going to come up with. And it really gets you thinking too, like, how much do I really know about space?
That's a very good, I think, example for the people, and again for scientists as well, because there has been multiple cases, and I think I've been watching this interview some time ago, about the famous asteroid, the Oumuamua, that passed, and there's been a huge talk about, it's been, from beside it's been out over our solar system. It could be, a UFO. There's been multiple things, but there's been a lot of scientists, and there's been actually a few that talked about that this could be potential, a UFO or things like that. But a lot of scientists said, no, this is just a rock, unusual, very unusual shape. Again, for somebody who's listening or watching, you never heard about, you can actually Google Oumuamua. Don't ask me to spell that, and
Yeah.
you're gonna find it. So, but it's very interesting, because a lot of people, as I said, once you start to grow up and kind of understand the way things work, you get stuck in this kind of knowledge, where you're like, I know, instead of actually being this small kid who's asking all these ridiculously good questions, and just being curious, all of a sudden. So I think that's, for the scientists also, I'm sure there's a lot of brilliant, scientists who do some groundbreaking research, but I think that curiosity should not be lost along the lines also.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. And it's funny because for the age groups, like I really enjoy the questions from the younger kids, but it's actually the older generations, and when I say older, I guess not even older, but adults on that I love to have them look through the telescopes. The kids love it. They do. But it's kind of the opposite thing. Like they haven't had that much experience where they've formed an idea of what Saturn's ring should look like or what Jupiter should look like through a telescope. But adults have. So when they look at the moon through a telescope or look at a planet through a telescope, it's mind-blowing to them to have that experience. And I have had so many adults that just they can't stop looking through the telescope. They've never seen the crater of the moon that way. They are just, I can't believe it actually looks like a sphere. Or when they look at Saturn, they're like, I can actually see the rings. They're blown away by it. So the other end of the spectrum for actually doing outreach stuff, I actually do like working with the adults for the telescope work. That to me is a lot of fun.
Got it. So part of that, again, you have this amazing piece of technology, in your observatory, the 16-inch Meade LX200R, which for me personally, LX200R doesn't say anything. So maybe you can clarify, what that equipment does for you, because as I said, you work on black hole research, exoplanets. So maybe you can talk about a little bit more of have you, as a group. Maybe you can talk about groundbreaking type of research that you achieved, or maybe some future exciting projects that you're looking forward to.
Yeah, so I work with, my boss is the in-house astrophysicist, the resident astrophysicist on site that works in the labs. He's also a co-founder of the observatory. And so my boss's boss is also the other co-founder of the observatory, who is the head of research at the university. So we're a satellite like property, I guess, or a branch of the campus for the Munster Technology University. So the two of them have been running the observatory for, it'll be 15 years. They've had the telescope up there. And I think people that know a lot about observatories will know that observatories are typically at the top of mountains in very dry climates and as far up in the atmosphere as you could possibly get, with being away from as much light pollution as possible. And we are on the edge of a city, the second largest city in Ireland. We are at sea level because we're actually at a castle. Was actually a fort that for protecting the city against pirates. So we're literally on the water. We're not dry because we're on the water and we're in Ireland, so we get a lot of rain and moisture and everything else. We're literally the worst place for an observatory, but because of where it is, they ended up developing a technique that allows them to, essentially kind of in almost in a way, it's not really erasing the atmosphere, but almost in a way erasing the atmosphere, because they've developed a technique called CELPHOT, selective photometry. And so they are able to see that the light that's coming in, they can differentiate between, is this light scatter, is this light pollution, is this whatever, and then they're really able to narrow down, this is the light that we want that's coming from a star. And this technique that they've developed is very, very successful. And it came about because they're in a situation where they don't have the best seeing conditions. So they do like black hole research and exoplanet research. So they are, the reason, it's not that they're specifically targeting those two areas, it's that those two areas is what helps them hone the technique, actually. So when you're looking at the supermassive black holes, they are specifically looking at blazars. So they have jets coming out of them. And the blazars are the ones that have the jets pointed at us on Earth. So you're looking down the jet stream. So you have constant light coming at you. So they're able to test the technique that way. And then also exoplanets, because you're also looking at variations in light. So you're focusing on a star and watching your light curve. And when your light is constant, you know the star is clear. And then when you have that dip, and then it comes back up, you know something passed in front of it. So when it dips and goes back up, they're able to use that dip for more testing. So that's what the research is on for those two things. So I don't do any of the data analysis and processing side of it. I get to like kind of learn about it and see all of it. But I think I have the most fun is I get to actually go out there and like hunt around for that kind of thing and use the telescope for it. So we do a lot of work with, so the telescope is called Big Bertha because you have to name telescopes. It's like, and now for me, it's like an essential, like I'll say, what's the name of your telescope? And they say, oh, I don't have one. I said, that's ridiculous. We're naming the telescope right now. That's absurd. So Big Bertha is at the top of the tower. That's the 16-inch. And so I get to run Bertha. I get to help the astrophysicist get images. So we'll do fun images like the Ring Nebula, or we'll do the moon or planets and things. And we'll use that kind of stuff for public outreach and for other things, education outreach. And but the black holes and the exoplanets is more for the research side. So the images aren't as pretty. So you get a nice picture of Saturn and it looks nice, but you get an image of a black hole and I say it kind of looks like and kids today probably won't even understand this. I'm totally dating myself, but back in the day when we had analog television and you're flipping through the channels, it's like shh, and it's all like snowy and black and white. That's what our images look like for the black holes and the exoplanets. So they're not pretty images, but they're not meant to be either. It's really, you're looking at photon counts and that kind of thing. So it's not the easiest thing. It really is kind of hunting through the sky to find stuff. And especially for me, I think the most fun is hunting down an exoplanet because it's so complicated. Everything has to be perfect to get it. Because one of the exoplanets that we focused on last year was HAT P36b. And that is actually, it's in the northern sky. And sometimes it's too low to the horizon at night to be able to image it. So we need it to be at a certain point of the sky during the night where we can get some good images. Then on top of it, we need the planet to be transiting the star when we go out. So that could be happening during our daytime. It could be happening anytime. So it has to be during the night when it's transiting. So that narrows down your window even further. So it has to be in the sky, also transiting, also happen to be good weather that night where it's really nice and clear and you have no rain, no clouds, and you have to have a certain number of hours for the actual imaging because you need a certain amount of time for the planet to actually cross in front of the star. So it all has to just go perfectly. So it's incredibly frustrating, but that's what I like. I like a challenge. So to me, I'm just like, yeah, this is what we're going to go out tonight. We're going to do it. So I've become an exoplanet hunter. I'm obsessed with that. That's so much fun to me.
That is awesome. That's really cool. So like, what is the Blackrock Castle Observatory is going to be focusing on, going up from a year from now? Because I don't know if you have these conversations. I'm pretty much sure you do as a team, where you talk about future plans, projects that you're going to be putting together. So what are you going to be focusing on the most? Is it going to be the outreach events, or capturing the objects, or outreach?
Yeah, we do. So we do all of it simultaneously. So the day job is the outreach and the education, and the night job literally is the observing. And we're still finishing up on a project at the moment where we actually were able to, it was called the Mask Project. So we were actually able to take the same technique that we're using to look at black holes and exoplanets and apply that to actually testing mask materials for COVID. So we partnered up with the photonics team at the university, and what they did was they work with lasers. So they took a dummy head and they pumped aerosols through it and then put different materials and different masks onto the dummy head as the aerosols were being pumped out of it. And then there was a laser wall. So as that was coming through the mask and the material, anything that made it through would be lit up, the particles would be lit up. On the other side of the laser wall was a camera. The same cameras that we use for the night sky, same exact sort of imaging. So they would take the images, they would come out, and when you would see them, they would look like star fields, really. There would be points of light. And so because they were these points of light, they could be analyzed the same way, using that same technique that we would analyze the black hole and exoplanet kind of stuff. So they're able to measure it that way and then figure out which material was the most effective for masks. So that study has been going on since the summertime, and they're just wrapping that up now. So for the next little while, our main focus is going to be finishing that. And then going further, I've been working on something, the guys had started it, and then I got super passionate. And I was like, I'm basically taking this over. This is going to be my baby. And the idea is to hopefully, and COVID has not been in lockdown and everything has not been very friendly for this idea because I've been working on it for about a year, but we'd like to set up remote observatories and have remote observatories running in other time zones. And my eyes are set on the US, West Coast US, out in the desert, and have it so that kids here will be able to be in the classroom and image while it's still nighttime over there. So it's enough of a time difference. They're about 8 hours different. So they'll have the opportunity to do real observing from the classroom during the day. So that's the goal. And we'll still be able to use that for our own remote observing when we want to do, if we have specific targets that are too low to the horizon for us here, or if we're not getting good weather and we need to get data, we can get it from those telescopes. So we're working on that, and we're just kind of hoping things will open up again a little bit more so we can really push that project through. So that for me is going to be my main focus for this next coming year.
Got it, got it. So I mean, super exciting. So I love the fact that you talked about the masks and how, again, the equipment that you're using in, observatory currently, how is that benefiting the research part of creating those masks? And it's just, shows again, and it proves the fact how space industry and space science can benefit us as people, because a lot of, R&D is being done again, and due to the space travel, I mean, we have so much of the technology, and it touches a lot of the medicine side of the things, different stuff in society that benefits us so much is being done through space exploration. So I think if we're going to do more of it and faster, it's going to be better. So, and I love the fact that you want to do the remote. So for the remote observatories, is that going to be, because there's companies just like, Telescope Live who do, remote observing, which you can pay the memberships from, it costs like from $4 up to, I think, $40 plus a month, where you can do the observing. So it's going to be pretty similar model, but if it's going to be free for the young people, for the, who are working with you, or how is it going to work?
Yeah, so I don't have all of that figured out yet, but my idea with that, hopefully it would be something that we would build into our programs for like Space Week programs and things, or build it into our, because we actually, so I have, I didn't even mention this, I was an astrophysicist on site. We also have another astronomer who's our education astronomer. She's a teacher and an astronomer. So she builds out space education specifically that fits the Irish modules here for teachers and things. So my idea would be that what we're doing with telescopes would be part of the courses and things that she's building out. So hopefully, yes, hopefully it would be free to, everything works on funding. So if we can get funding to fund that, then we can supply it to schools for free. But that'll be determined kind of later. We need to get the equipment up and running first.
We're not going to get politics involved on this show, because that's tough. So, but what would you like to see, again, as you talked about, just now, about the courses that kids, again, they're being given those different courses that, again, people, just like you mentioned, being, put together, and they determine, okay, that's what the kid's supposed to be learning about space. So from your personal view, like, what would you think will be like, a couple of priorities that people, or kids should know about, in the science community?
That's a really good question. I think I simply, I think at the very most basic that the night sky is available to anyone. And I think that's something just to get that idea into kids' heads to start with, because then you plant that seed and then things can kind of go from there. So and I think especially being in a city, I think it's really hard for people to kind of connect with the night sky because you don't see much of it. But if you can just give people a few things to look at, everyone can see the moon. Everyone can see the planets usually when they're out. And I think for even anybody of any age, actually, to be able to point at a planet in the night sky and go, oh, that's what I'm looking at. That's not just a star. Or even just to give them certain constellations and things. I think it's really important just to get out there and start looking. Because once you start doing it, I know for me, it kind of, it reconnects me, I guess. I don't know how to really explain it well, but it kind of gives me this sense of like, oh yeah, the day-to-day stuff kind of doesn't really matter. There's other stuff happening out there that's like bigger than me, and it's in the sky, and like we're a part of something that's way bigger than just like my office and this and that. You know, there's a whole universe out there literally that can be explored. So I think just starting off, I think the most important thing is for kids, just start looking up, just start looking into the sky, and then you can kind of build on from there for your interests.
Exactly. That's a great point, and I think that should be a really great, solid, platform that you can build on. Just first of all, as you said, just letting kids know that look, this is available, and again, just giving them perspective. Like, look, you live in a universe, and as you mentioned, like especially now, I think a lot of people need that message. That whatever problems you're having, there's so much more happening right now while we're talking. I mean, while we're talking, the universe expanding is faster than the speed of light. And we don't even feel, we're turning like on this planet, and things are happening, and we're just sitting here talking on Zoom. So it's
Yeah,
pretty incredible. But so talking about one of the incredible things that's happening, coming back to the planet point, and us going and occupying Mars is kind of big deal. And of course, with our Artemis mission going back to the moon, finally, hopefully, after all these 50 plus years, a lot of people looking excited for that. So what's your personal thoughts about this mission, of going to Mars and creating sustainable habitats for us to live on? And would you do it? I mean, would you buy a ticket and go there, and would you stay, or would you come back?
That's those are a lot of questions. You could do a whole podcast just on those questions, to be honest. It is so exciting. I think that I have so much I want to say. So I was really, if I want to go back to Apollo real quick, I was really fortunate that I got to watch Apollo 50, the film, which if anyone has not seen that, absolutely have to, it's phenomenal. And I got to actually watch it with Buzz Aldrin in front of me watching it. Wow. And I had never seen that footage start to finish. Like I grew up in the US, but also I grew up at a time where people were losing faith in NASA. There wasn't as much happening. The shuttle missions had just ended, and it was kind of like, what are we doing? Why are we spending money on the International Space Station? That's the kind of stuff people were saying. So I didn't grow up in the excitement of the Apollo era that like my parents did. They grew up with like everything being influenced by NASA and space. I mean, the cars looked like rockets. They had fins on them. You had like rocket ship lunch boxes they were going to school with. And I didn't grow up in that. I grew up in the opposite end of that, where they're like, we're wasting money up there and we have problems down here, that kind of thing. So it's nice to actually see that it seems like things have turned around and people have gotten a lot more interested and really excited about what's going on. And I think that it is that same excitement that happened for Apollo when it was like, oh my God, we're going to the moon. I think that's the same kind of energy that's happening now for Mars. We've never been to another planet. And the idea that we're watching rockets that they're successful. Yes, they exploded, but we learned stuff from the explosions. Explosions are actually a success as well. But we're seeing history in the making, and I think that's what's getting people excited, that this is not just a pipe dream. This is really in our future here. And I think the idea of going to Mars is going to be very interesting. And for me, it's very, very interesting, because part of my studies for foreign language is studying people and cultures and that kind of thing. So I am very interested to see, and I know this is the stuff that NASA works on and thinks about and stuff, but and also an opportunity for people who are interested in getting into space, like space anthropology and psychologists and medical doctors and all of that are also needed in space.
Big stuff.
Big deal. But I think the anthropology side of it is what people don't think about as much. And like I mentioned before about going to the moon, like when we go places, we take all of our human characteristics with us. So the idea of being stuck in a rocket is very interesting to me, because if you think about going to the moon, it was that was the biggest, most powerful rocket at the time, right? Saturn V got us out there in 3 days. That's a lot closer than Mars. When we're talking about going to Mars, that's, like 7 to 10 months, depending on where it is at the time. So that's not like, oh, if we have an issue, we can just turn around, or if we have a fight and we don't get along, we'll go back and pick up a different astronaut. No, like once you're on that thing, you're stuck together for possibly 10 months before you even get to the planet. So that to me is very interesting. That dynamic there is interesting. And how do you keep yourself interested? How do you keep yourself going when you're in that? And I think with what we're going through now in the world, where we're very isolated and stuck inside and that kind of thing, will probably produce really good astronauts, really, because I think we are like really realizing we have to be crafty and creative and that kind of stuff. But also just living on the planet, being so far away from everything you've ever known. I think it'll be very interesting to see how astronauts deal with not being able to see their home planet. It'll be a dot in the sky, where everywhere we've gone now, we've been able to, I say we, like I was up there, but the astronauts are able to look back at Earth and say, that's where I live. That is recognizable to me. And I've spoken to astronauts who are on the International Space Station, and there is a bit of isolation that they deal with, and there are things that they really miss, like just hearing bird sounds and hearing like the wind in trees and like hearing leaves kind of rustle and that kind of stuff. And they have recordings, like Earth recordings up there that they listen to when they feel detached. And that's only just not that far away. So once they get into a rocket, they get back to Earth, it's there again. And when they're passing over, they can pick out their hometowns or even countries they visited and things. It's not going to be like that in Mars. It's going to be a completely different thing. And even communications, like 20 minutes to send communication between. So it's not like you can pick up the phone and have a phone call with your parents back home or your family or anything like that. So there's so much there from like just a human standpoint. That's not even the technology side of it. I just think the human aspect is very, very interesting. So I think it's exciting that I'm probably going to be alive to see it. Now, your last question, would I do it? A couple years ago, I was crazy enough. I think was it called Mars One, like the Mars One mission, I think it was. They wanted to send people to Mars. I think it was 2020 was the idea. And I watched people had signed up for it. And I thought, yeah, you know what? I'm going to do this. Like, I'm bouncing around all over the place. I'm not settled. Why not get on a rocket and go out to Mars? I'm glad I didn't. Well, the mission didn't go through anyways. I think the whole thing got canceled. But that was a one-way ticket. They were shipping you out there and there was no way to come back. So I don't know if I love the idea of it. I absolutely love the idea of it. But would I go with the possibility of not coming back? Probably not. Like, I would probably want to at least know that there is an option to leave and come back to Earth if I could. But I think it's really, would you go? Would you go to Mars?
Well, the first step, and that's another question that I wanted to ask you. Again, thank God you didn't go to that mission and it didn't work out, as a one-way mission. But have you applied for the Dear Moon mission?
You know what? I didn't do it, and I keep seeing stuff on it, and I was like, oh, I have to do it. I have to do it. And I didn't. I haven't done it.
Yeah, because for people who are listening, I don't think that's still available, because I think they went into phase two. The phase two, I think they just finished the second round of picking people. So it was until the 21st March. So for everybody who's watching, so that passed. But for the ones who applied, again, hopefully, finger crossed for you and for myself, hopefully, because again, they're looking for 8 people. SpaceX and part of this, Japanese billionaire who are going to be putting this project together and taking on 8 people for free to take them around the orbit of the moon and come back. And again, it's going to be, pretty incredible event to watch. or to be part of for somebody who is gonna, you know, be one of those astronauts. So it's gonna be incredible.
Yeah.
But to your, you know, like one way, no, but yeah, why not? I mean, you know, because as Elon Musk said before, you know, it will be really cool to if you're born on the planet and you will die on Mars. You know, just that thought that you're going to be dying on different planets, as he said, just not on impact. It's a great thought. You know, it's a great thought. So I think you know, but it could be different because, as you said, there's a lot of psychological issues, and again, it's part of that. I've been having countless conversations with people who go through analog missions all over the world, and that's the number one you know, piece that I get from them. Also, again, they have so many different conflicts about small stuff, like you took the last piece of, you know, whatever that I was eating, and you
Yeah.
get these conflicts, and they've been talking about having technology, you know, like machine learning or AI based technology that helps to resolve these human problems. You know, basically you have two humans who not communicating well, and you have a third person, and you have a machine who actually recommends the third person, you should intervene and tell them this. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how technology can help us to handle these conflicts and these situations. But there's going to be a bigger problem, which I know you have a passion for, as I talked about the space law. So how do you think Mars should look like as the society moving further, and what type of rules and regulations should be applied on the planet?
Oh, that's good questions. Yeah, I think that it'll be not as uncivilized as I think I'm kind of making it out to be while I'm explaining it, because obviously when they are picking people, there is a process. It's not like when we were leaving Europe and then Europeans were going off to other places, they were just packing people onto boats and sending them away. There's a process. It's everybody's going to be vetted. You have to make sure you're healthy. You have to make sure you're mentally sound, and that you have the characteristics necessary to be able to get along with people. So I think that it'll be a lot more civilized, and especially at the beginning, I think it'll be a lot more civilized on Mars than it will be here on Earth. And because I think a lot about like the labs in Antarctica and the people living down there, because it's very similar to what they're going to have to deal with out in space. You know, you're really, really isolated. You can't just up and go somewhere if you want to. It's a process to get in and out and that kind of thing. And there hasn't been too much unrest down there. You know, there's not constant murders and constant stealing and everything. I'm sure there are a lot of things they have to deal with, but they're, you know, they're scientists and they're taught to be logical and really kind of think through things. That doesn't mean they all love each other and they all get along really well. I mean, obviously that's not the case, but I think I'm sure that there's probably, I'm sure if you spoke to a psychologist, I'm sure there's probably a number where once you hit a certain number of people from a certain group or like diversity of a pot of people, that's like the threshold of when everything just starts going crazy. I'm sure there's probably something that people have figured out to go like, everything gets civilized until you get here, and then everything just goes.
Yeah, 99, 100, and we go nuts. That's it.
Yeah, then everybody just goes nuts. I think it's a very philosophical issue. You know, I think it's a lot of like if you could get away with stuff, like would you get away with stuff if you could, kind of thing. And so that's where your law comes in. If you start putting those things in order, then you go, well, if I'm going to be punished, then I'm not going to go ahead and steal that man's portion of food, and I'm going to let him eat it, and I'll stay here even though I'm hungry. And, you know, if where you don't have the law in place, you'll be like, I'm taking that off that plate and eating it. So, you know, it's going to be really interesting to see in Mars, because they can't just grow plants anywhere. It's going to have to be really rationed and really regulated, a lot of regulations. So I think what I would like to see in terms of what sort of regulations would be out there, ideally I'd like to see one kind of consensus in government of figuring everything out, but we know from experience that doesn't really work on our own planet. So I would at least like to see that the countries get along. And you know, we have treaties signed for the moon that nobody's going to take anything from it or touch it and things, but not every country has signed that treaty. And there's a lot more technologically advanced countries and more spacefaring countries. There's a lot more talk about like mining the moon and building things, and it's a little bit unnerving because you can't really mess with the moon. There's, you start taking mass away from it and it affects the orbit, which affects everything for us down here. So if you adding things, taking stuff away, it's a little bit kind of, like I'm really hoping space law takes off because we really need to kind of really protect our moon. We don't want it like coming crashing back down to us here on Earth or floating off into space. And then all of our tides are all over the place, and seas are going crazy, and it's a whole thing. So I think regulations are really important for space.
Oh, that's for sure. I mean, that's an entirely different topic because I've been talking with these people who are working on the space law, and it's a very sensitive subject because, again, we're dealing with different cultures and different people. Again, look, there's over 7 billion people on the planet. If you're going to ask them one question on one particular topic, everybody will pretty much sure will say, I'm right on that. And everybody has different opinions. So how do you gather all these people? Because again, when we're going to be taking, space industry, let's say, occupying the Mars type of situation into space tourism level, where we're going to have, like rockets coming in like every week or every day, and how are we going to handle those situations when you're talking about, stealing, killing, and, but personally, I wouldn't like to see Mars becoming, Earth 2.0, where it's going to be, euros, dollars, pounds, yens, and we have same government, the same rules. I mean, and it's a brand new planet. Imagine people like staying in those, lava tubes or in the craters, living in those domes, locked. You cannot go for a walk, and you have the same government. It's going to be rough. It's going to be rough. So, but hopefully, again, we are clever people and we know we're good at, problem solving. So I'm pretty sure there's a lot of great people, who are already thinking about those problems. And I'm sure, they will come up with some sort of a great solutions. So again, moving on from Mars, because I know one way that you can look at the Mars is through, again, what you have behind you is Eleanor. Here you go. That's her.
That's Eleanor.
That's beautiful. So first of all, how did you come up with the name?
So Eleanor is my passion. So I used to be obsessed with foreign language, but then like my hobby was cars. I was a huge motorhead when I was younger.
Gone in 60 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. So I have, my mother has my bedroom at home as like a shrine to me. It's exactly the way I left it when I left in like 2005. It's like, or 2010, whenever I left, it is exactly the same. So when you walk into my bedroom at home in Buffalo, New York, there are still car posters all over the room. And I have like my phone in the room. It's a 57 Chevy Bel Air, and it like rings and the lights go off and it honks and stuff. Like I was obsessed with cars. My favorite was the Eleanor, the 68 Shelby GT 500 Mustang. And so that was I was just obsessed with that car. Like I really, really wanted one. Of course, I knew I'd never get one, but Gone in 60 Seconds, I absolutely loved the movie. And so when I switched from cars over to my first telescope, it just made sense that was the name. And it just fit, like I just liked the name Eleanor. I was like, it just makes sense for her.
Exactly. No, it fits really well. So I love that. So can you talk about why Meade LXD75 N6? Why particular this model? And what would you say again for the beginner astrophotographers? They're thinking about getting started in astrophotography, or they're already maybe a little bit dabbling a bit for a few weeks or a few months. So what will be your advice, first of all, for the equipment and making that decision? What do you buy?
Yeah, I get asked a lot, like, what's the best telescope? And actually, now that we just talked about cars, I use the analogy that it's the same as asking someone, what's the best car to buy? Because there is no right answer. And telescopes are exactly the same. There's so much that's dependent on your lifestyle and what you do. And you have to find like what fits you and what you're looking for and what your expectations are. So I did exactly what you're not supposed to do. I said, most of the time they say, go with an alt-az mount, go with something a little bit smaller that's easier to move around. And I just said, nope, I'm going to go German equatorial and I'm going to get a reflector. And they recommend refractors because they're easier to take care of. Get a reflector, they're a lot more sensitive. I just like dove right into the deep end. But I had done a lot of research on telescopes. I spent about a year just reading everything I could on like Cloudy Nights forums and like Facebook forums and everything I could possibly find, watching loads of YouTube videos. And I decided that this is what I wanted because I knew I wanted something that I could grow into. I knew I'm the type of person that likes a challenge, and they said that these are tricky to learn and you have to really work through it. But I didn't want to make a purchase that I knew I would grow out of and then I'd be bored and be like, oh, I want to upgrade. Because you hear this a lot in the telescope community, is that you get a smaller scope and then they call it aperture fever. So you quickly get aperture fever and you want to go bigger. And to be honest, I'd love to go bigger. I will never get rid of this telescope. I would love to go bigger. I'm lucky.
You have an observatory that you're working in.
Yeah, I'm lucky that my aperture fever I get to take care of when I go to work every day, and I deal with the larger telescopes there. So this is perfect for me. So as things to think about is, are you going to be able to carry it? Do you have a place that it's going to stay? So I have to be able to move her around, and this is about the heaviest I can get. I think altogether the whole setup is 26 kgs. So I can't go much more than that. I'm not that big either. Like, I'm kind of a short person, so it's not the easiest to move her around anyways. So yeah, aperture is king when it comes to telescopes. So like the bigger, in general, the bigger your telescope is, the more you can see. I knew I wanted something I could potentially do astrophotography with, and so that's why I ended up with the German equatorial mount. It's better for astro than the Alt-Az. And I would recommend anybody to just, if you want to do astrophotography, like I had a friend long ago that told me, for regular photography, the best camera you have is the camera that's on you at that moment. So even if you have the most expensive camera in the world, if a shot comes up and the only thing you have is your phone, take it on your phone. Don't sit there and go, oh, I wish I had my camera. And that's exactly kind of my attitude with Eleanor, is like, I don't have a ton of opportunity here where we have beautiful clear nights and I can do a lot of astrophotography. So for me, when I have a clear night and I know I'm going to have maybe just an hour or two, I just throw my phone onto Eleanor. I have an adapter that fits the eyepiece. My phone can fit right on there, and then I can take my images that way. So on my Instagram, all my stuff, for the most part, unless it came from the observatory, that's just my phone. And it's amazing what you can get just from phone cameras. And they're improving all the time. Like the newer cameras are just incredible. So there's a lot you can do in astrophotography without having, I think in the past, you really had to invest. You really had to give it a lot of money and get really good equipment. But just the stuff that you have right now, you can really get some decent images. So if you're interested, I maybe wouldn't go as crazy as me and get this set up. The Newtonians are a little bit sensitive to air, humidity, and to being moved around a lot, and that sort of thing. So I would say maybe refractors would be a little bit less sensitive if you know you're going to be moving around and kind of even just putting stuff into the back of a car and driving off. Like, she needs to be padded down and not move at all. And she's just a bit big, where you can get refractors that are smaller and things like that. So yeah, it's a difficult question to answer because it all just depends on what you're interested in, what you're looking for. But if you're not interested in astrophotography and just want to look at the night sky, I would say there's so many good telescopes that have go-tos that you can just actually this I barely ever use it, but this is a motorized mount that has the go-to in it, so you can actually just type in, I want to see Betelgeuse, and type it in and it'll go to it. So if you are just interested in just observing with your eye and taking a look at the night sky, but you don't want to have to figure out the night sky, they have telescopes out there that it's all programmed into it for you. Like I said, like a challenge. So I don't usually use the motors. I love star hopping, and I star hop through the sky a lot. I actually really love doing that. Because at work I just, type it in. I just type in my target, and then, the mount and everything takes care of it for me. So I actually don't use the motors on Eleanor very often.
Got you. So I'm actually, while you're talking, I'm looking at the pictures. Just coming back to your Instagram account, that people can find you, Sacred Black Astronomy, and of course the Twitter is going to be included there. But it's pretty incredible, if you're saying, that's being done with your phone only. I don't know if you guys can see that. So that's so basically that. So so it's pretty incredible, that you can do that just with a phone, and again, the equipment that you have. So what will be your take on like buying equipment? Would you go to brand new, used is perfectly fine also maybe, and maybe you can give a few websites for people to buy, this equipment from.
Yeah, I think that for if you're going to, if you know that you want to test it out and just test out a smaller scope and just kind of get to know a small scope and then move up, which is kind of what I did. I was lucky that the observatory let me take home a smaller scope, so I just got to kind of play with one first to figure out that I wanted to get something bigger. Then yeah, get something that's used. You don't have to go brand new. I wouldn't recommend doing, if you really want to get a big purchase, I would say get a new one. If you're really going to invest and you know you want to have a certain scope, definitely get a new one. I give everybody all the advice that I didn't take. Mine is actually secondhand. I actually got it from a guy, but I also knew that I would be able to fix it if I had any issues. I have an observatory at my disposal where the astrophysicists I work with are not just astrophysicists, they're also they have degrees in instrumentation, so they know telescopes and cameras inside out. So I'm very lucky I have people at my disposal, so I was able to take that risk. Luckily I haven't had too many issues with her. But yeah, I would say if you're really going to invest it, yeah, go brand new, and then you can always start collecting more. That's not an issue. You can always have other telescopes as well. But in terms of buying, depends on where you are. If you're in the US, definitely check out OPT for sure. And we do have equipment out in California already. And when we set up the stuff out there, that was before my time. They had set up a remote observatory out in California that's not running now, but that all of that equipment actually came from OPT. So they're really good out there. In Europe, I don't know for sure. I know there's like a telescopes.eu that they do a lot of stuff. And here in Ireland, we work with Stephen from KTech. And KTech is fantastic. He's based out, I think he's just outside of Dublin. And he knows so much about telescopes. He's so passionate about telescopes, and he's just a great guy. So if you're on the island and you have any questions or anything, he's really good. Like, fire him some questions and he'll answer you. He just knows everything about it, and he comes down for a lot of our events. We invite him out for stuff, and we get a lot of our telescopes from him that we give out as prizes and things like that. So in Ireland for sure, KTech, Stephen's fantastic. Can't recommend him enough.
Here you go. That's awesome. And Ireland is pretty small, so if you just ask your neighbor, do you know Stephen, and he sells telescopes, I'm pretty sure they will direct you to Stephen right quick.
Yeah, that's exactly how Ireland is. Like, people already know me. Oh yeah, the girl with the telescope, the one that's outside at night with the telescope. Yeah, they already know who I am.
That is awesome. So what would you say again for those beginner, people, like when it comes to, post-processing, and I don't know how much of that do you do personally. I know it's a big part for a lot of people, astrophotographers. So can you talk about that portion and what do you use, for post-processing, stacking images, and maybe, some softwares that, I know it's going to be multiple questions now again, so sorry about that, but any softwares, because again, people are now using, Topaz Labs, kind of, denoising softwares and stuff like that. So can you talk about basically what you use for the post-processing and something for the beginners that will make easier for them as well?
Yeah, so so depending on what you're using and depending how you're doing it, I don't do a ton of post-processing. It's actually something I want to get into more because like we were talking before, I'm part of the Stella group, and they are fantastic. It's a women in astrophotography group, and I learned so much from them, and I'm so always inspired by their images, and I would love to do more of that myself. A lot of, if you're using your phone, if you are going to do astrophotography on your phone, there are great apps like Snapseed is fantastic because you can really bring things out there, and it's a really good app for that. For the research images, we process in we use Maxim DL, and then I'll get I'll get an image from I'll ask them, can I steal this image? Like, can I take this from your research stuff? And then they'll give me, I'll process it in Maxim first, take it out, we'll do all the stacking and everything, and then I'll usually put it in maybe like Lightroom, depending on what it is. But I'll use Lightroom, and every once in a while I might use a Photoshop. I haven't done that actually with the observatory images. I did do it with what was it? I did a moon composite image. It's on my Instagram, and and that was actually shot. Both of those were cell phone shots. One of them was a cell phone shot. One of them was an image to a DSLR. Actually, it was to a Sony A7. So I did a composite shot with that, and you used Photoshop for it. So yeah, you don't need to have anything. There's a lot of software out there for stacking and everything, but if you just want to get started, there's a lot you can do. With a lot of people already have Lightroom and Photoshop. So if you've got that, you can start with doing those. And there are ways to stack images in Photoshop as well. I've seen there are a lot of YouTube tutorials on that as well. So you can start doing that before you get into like real image stacking software. And like I said, there are apps out there just if you want to do quick manipulations and things, and quick enhancing. I don't want to keep saying manipulation. Quick enhancements, basically.
That's perfect. Look, that's perfectly fine. The audience, they get it. Okay, that's for the haters. There's like, oh, it's all manipulation, you know.
I know, yeah.
Look,
they're like, oh, these are all fake.
Exactly. So the question that I wanted to ask you, because look, that's perfectly fine, and that's what I wanted to ask you, because I had one incredible guest, and actually he just emailed me not long ago. We have these conversations on email, and he's gonna be, I think, a second person. I think, as he said, it's like the third person. He said he died not long ago, which he's just old, an old person, and he died. But the thing is that I want to say that he's top 2 right now in the world when it comes to visual observations of variable stars. And all he does is visual observation. So would you say for the people, again, do more of that? Because now, like astrophotography is going nuts right now, like everybody wants to get into it. So would you recommend for the people, and again, he's just 350,000 visual observations that he is on right now. At least he's going to get to that. So the amount of work and research, I mean, he has about that big, probably it's bigger, about that stack of papers where he writes everything by hand. Nothing on the computer, tracks the sky by, he's just unbelievable. And he lives in Australia, has his own observatory. He has 22-inch Dobsonian, I think, or, just crazy stuff. He built that himself. And by day, he's a business person. He has a small plumbing company. So, and but the amount of information and data and research that he has for the science community, it's incredible, because he's been published on numerous science, documents and stuff like that. So, I mean, so it's incredible research that he achieves. So the question is, how much of that you can achieve through astrophotography versus visual observation, and what would you recommend for people to pursue?
I think it's a very personal thing, because people are, I think I'm a bit of a blend of both. I love the instrumentation side of it. Which is why I have this set up. I love working on the telescope. I love working on the mounts. I just love that part of it. But there are some nights where, like I have, when I'm at the observatory, it's a lot of instrumentation, and it's a lot of, is this working right? Is that going right? And trying to fix things. So it's a lot more technical. But then when I get to do stuff with Eleanor, I'll take some images and things like that. But sometimes I just sit there with her. And like the other night, I took a few pictures of the moon. We had a good clear night. I took a few pictures of the moon, and it was a great night. And I didn't even take pictures. I ended up just took pictures of the moon, and then moved to the Pleiades, moved to Mars, kind of just like started swinging through the sky. Went over to Orion and just did visual. I didn't even take pictures that night, other than the first couple moon shots. And it was just so clear that once I was finished, I just sat next to her on the bench, and I just kind of looked at the sky. And I was like, this is amazing. And like, sometimes you just have to have those nights. So I like both sides. So it kind of depends, because I do know people that they plan it like well in advance. Like this is, which we do for the observatory, we plan everything out, but they plan out their own time on their own equipment, and they're going, I'm going out this night, and this is exactly what I'm going to be imaging. This is exactly how I'm going to be imaging it. And that is the only thing that they do. And they're not so interested in the observational side. And then there's other people that never take a photograph. I know someone who has it's a 10-inch or 12, no, sorry, it's a 16-inch Meade light bridge, which is a Newtonian. It's a Dobsonian, and huge. And I said, oh, so obviously you connect a camera to it. And he went, why would I put a camera on it? What? You have this huge, all you do is look through it. Yeah, I look at the night sky. Like, okay. I was shocked. But yeah, so it all depends. There's no like right answer to it. It doesn't mean just because you have a telescope you have to get into astrophotography. You don't have to get into the image stacking. If you just want to look at the stars and planets and things, go for it. And if you never want to look through it, like with Big Bertha at the top of the tower, we don't look through her ever. We always have cameras attached to it. We always have everything done through the laptop. So if that's what you're into as well, and you want to get these incredible, beautiful images that you would never see with your eye, then do that as well, because there's a beauty to that as well. If you take a gorgeous image of a deep sky object, that light that you captured that night is yours and yours alone. That came through your telescope, that came through your equipment and through your laptop. That light didn't go anywhere else that night, and it'll never go anywhere else other than that image. So there's a beauty to that as well. So I think like whatever you're into, there's no right or wrong answer in astronomy, and you just do what you want to do with it. That it's completely open. That's what's so much fun about it, because there's such a variation within the field.
Exactly. Great. That's a great advice. And I think that the fact that you love both parts, again, just visual observations and astrophotography, is because, there's that piece of just being an artist, which again, you are, that as well. So that's why the both works out for you. So again, part of that is, the Galaxy season now is going to be on. So
Yeah.
what will be like your top locations that you're going to be, taking on?
That's a good one. I don't know if I'll get to it this year. Ireland's a bit tricky because the summer's a lot of fun, but it's not great in Ireland. We get better weather, which is fantastic, but our nights are like this long. So it's the problem is we don't have a ton of time for observing. But I've been looking at a lot of people have been posting a lot of whirlpool galaxies recently, and I've never actually imaged the whirlpool galaxy ever, and I would love to do that. It actually has an Irish connection as well, because if you've ever been up to Birr Castle, they have the Leviathan telescope there, which was the largest telescope in the world for 70 years. I mean, this is it's incredible. Actually, the first time I saw it, it's like in the middle of this field in front of this beautiful castle. The first time I walked out there and saw it, I actually gasped, and I just like couldn't believe it. I was like, it's beautiful, this thing. I think it's from like 1950s, or sorry, not 1850s era was when it was built. The whole thing is done on gears and motors. It's just massive. Is it 1.5 meters? I think the telescope is. I think it's 6 feet across. About 1 meter. So yeah. It's a big telescope. So the Earl of Ross that built this telescope, similar to what you were describing before with this guy in Australia, that he was there with his books out there and drawing what he was seeing through the telescope, and his drawings are still preserved today. And the Whirlpool Galaxy is one of the first ones that he imaged. He was one of the first ones to image it. And so it's credited with him, the Earl of Ross from Parsonstown. So it's got a bit of an Irish connection there. I think the Crab Nebula was the other one that he did as well. But yeah, and I think just the Whirlpool Galaxy is just so beautiful, because it's so stunning to look at, but you're watching destruction happening at the same time. So you're watching like one galaxy eat up another one, but it's so pretty at the same time. So I think it's just a really interesting object to look at. So I would love to do that if we get clear skies.
That is awesome. So again, a few questions that I have before we're going to go is, talking about the galaxies and those objects again. Look, we don't have the technology yet to go to explore the exoplanets or the galaxies. And again, there is, billions of different objects just like that, in the universe. And those objects are being born probably and dying again at the same time while we're talking. So would you think, again, in that vast of the universe, do you think we're alone?
That's interesting. So my boss's boss actually wrote a paper on this. Like, this is what he's an experimental physicist, astrophysicist, and this is what he kind of focused on. So I've had a lot of questions and chats with him, and it's an interesting question, because when you really look at the size of the universe, and especially working in a field where I'm dealing with exoplanets, and you see all these different types of exoplanets that we're finding, you think, how could we be alone? Like, there has to be life out there somewhere else, because the more we learn about exoplanets, the more we're finding more Earth-like planets and planets that could sustain life. And there's so many, there's this Goldilocks zone where planets they could be just in the right spot. Like, that's where Earth is. You're not too close to the sun where you're going to burn up and everything fries. You're not so far away that everything is frozen. And so that Goldilocks zone changes depending on what kind of star system you have and what size the planet is and everything. But we're finding so many variations of systems, and in so many different types of planets. You think there has to be something. Now, do I think it's intelligent life that's zooming around on rockets and spaceships? I don't know. That's to be determined. What I can say is I don't think we're being visited by aliens. I don't think we have intelligent beings coming to our planet, because when you look at the size of the universe, like, how would they find us? It's huge. Like, I think people really underestimate how big space is. Like, we are tiny. So talk about needle in a haystack. We're not even needle in a haystack. We're so tiny in the universe. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think that I don't think we're alone, but I also don't think we're being visited.
Got it. So everybody has a different opinion on that. There's a big argument, happening there. Again, part of that, as I talked about, Oumuamua, and people just got like, oh, it must be a UFO. No, it's just a rock. So, and we're talking about the scientists having those discussions. So again, as I talked before, 7 billion people, over 7 billion people, everybody's right on their personal opinion. Well, most of the time we just like throwing darts, and we're just trying to guess, and we think we know. But again, as I said before, I think we should be curious. Again, it's just my personal thought of like, we should, I think, question everything, because a lot of us went through, again, educational system, which is pretty much it's a cookie cutter approach for everybody, but everybody's different. I mean, the fingerprint, the DNA, everybody's different. So how it could be the same system could be used for everybody. It's just it's a completely different topic. But I think coming back to the point of just being curious again, and just thinking, oh, maybe there's something out there. Maybe we are being visited. Maybe they're here, maybe they're not. And there's so many different documentaries, information, articles. Like people, in the documentaries publicly. People who work in organizations, high level, government officials talking openly with no public books, that being sold, because a lot of those stories are just pushing books or trying to make the sales. And those people are talking publicly, openly, saying, yeah, we've been visited, we've been in the military base, those things came out, we can describe, but they look like this, and so there is a lot of these stories, but it's up to us to believe if it's right or not, so I cannot, install that belief into somebody, but everybody just have different opinions. Exactly.
Yeah, there's no real evidence either. We haven't found evidence. Yeah. That's the thing. So like, I can't say no, there absolutely isn't. And the universe is like I said, people really do underestimate how big this universe is. So do I think that there's intelligent life in civilized society somewhere on another planet? Yeah, there probably is. The likelihood of us actually finding them, I don't know. And the other side of it too, there's an argument, a technological, I forgot the name of it, but there's like an actual philosophical argument about technology that civilizations get to a certain point in their development where they become so technologically advanced that they end up destroying themselves. And so that maybe the reason that we're not actually finding any, or they're not finding us, is because they've already destroyed themselves, and we're just not, our timelines aren't linking up, basically, is what it is. So there's a lot of discussion about what's out there and what it looked like, and it's interesting. I've heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about this before too, that all the Hollywood movies and all the creativity that they have, and they always come up with these aliens that are very humanoid looking, and you look at how all these other planets are, and even just the diversity on our own planet, like animals are weird looking. So I don't know if we had aliens coming to visit us, would they actually look like us with like a head and 2 arms and 2 legs? Like, that might not be the most efficient way to be developed in and to actually evolve. So even if we did have aliens visiting us, would we even recognize that they're aliens? You know, so
Exactly.
it's an interesting topic. It really is.
Exactly, for sure. And I think a lot of people, they pick on now the Trump. It's like he created the Space Force. Oh, it must be because we're looking to fight off the aliens. It must be that.
Oh, I haven't even heard that one.
Yeah, you have to check it out, because he put this together, the Space Force. Here we go.
Yeah.
So again, I just love it. Again, I love your personal journey. I love the fact that you travel multiple countries. And again, as I told you before, the stars align for you perfectly, and you continue to grow and as a human being, and you continue to inspire others and inspire them to grow, and pursue the space industry, as the career. And you're just, you're a living proof that that's achievable. And, a lot of people can do that, even if you're coming from a different background, so that's really awesome. So the last question that I have for you, besides everything that you're having on so far, all the future plans, again, for this, remote observatories that you're having, like what will be your personal footprint or the legacy that you would like to leave behind you?
I would love for a couple of times I've met people, even just recently, where they've said to me, since I've met you, I've started looking up at the sky more. And to me, that is just the biggest compliment. And so if that's my legacy, where, I go tomorrow, but somebody carries out the rest of their life going, I met this girl once, and because of her, when the sky is clear, I look up at the stars. That's more than I could ever ask for. So that is my goal for everything that I do.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. And you're already doing that. And again, I think a lot of people, just like yourself, I think I told you that before, that we're, sometimes we don't take enough credit. And again, a lot of people in the science community don't do that. But look, you're already doing so much work because, again, Instagram, like social media, as I mentioned, you're putting out content for the observatory, you're working with them, science community, Space Week Harland, again, so you're impacting so many people, and sometimes we don't even feel like it, but because it's not always going to be people emailing you or calling you, hey, listen, because of you. So, but this is already happening, I'm pretty sure, because you're really active on all those different angles. So that's really awesome.
Well, thank you so much. That's so nice.
Yeah, that's no worries. So, guys and girls, wow, I mean, there's a lot of information, a lot of great stories. So, I enjoyed all of these here today on the show. I mean, a lot of fun times talk about the space, UFOs, black holes, exoplanets. I mean, we can go on and on and on because this is a really big topic. And look, if you enjoyed this episode, I just want to ask you one thing. If you pass this episode to your friends, and as you know, not because I need the subscribers, we just need more people to get involved in the science community, in the space community, and again, pursue this as a hobby or as a passion, as a career. And I think this episode could inspire and will inspire a lot of people. And Danielle, for you, a big thank you again for taking the time to do this. Really enjoyed it. The conversation, it was super fun. Happy that we met, and hopefully we can do 2.0 episode and, dive deep into other topics in the future as well.
Absolutely, I had a blast. There's so much to talk, and there's so much more we could talk about for sure. Let's do a 2.0.
Exactly, indeed. Okay, guys, so I appreciate you watching again, and I'll see you in the next episode. And until then, don't forget to keep exploring.